I am a Historitor, a recorder of the Imperium's glorious achievements as we sail the stars in the Indomitus Crusade. I have witnessed countless battles, recorded the deeds of heroes and legends, and preserved the history of mankind for future generations. I have seen the splendor of war, the glory of valor and sacrifice, and the majesty of faith manifested. I have seen worlds liberated and purged, civilizations reborn from rubble and ash, enemies of mankind shattered. But I have seen something else, something that shocks me, something that makes me tremble with fear and hope, things of nightmares that keep me up at night, something that no one expected. I have seen the prophecy. I'm recording this and sending it embedded within my report. My time could be short if I'm found out, but I need to share this with you. If you receive this, spread it far and wide, as the fate of mankind hangs by a thread, written in secret code, within a traitor Imperial governor's, now long dead, seized belongings. The prophecy is that the Imperium is at a crossroads. It is part of a plan, a long war, it said. The prophecy that the Emperor is a storm on a throne, barely contained. The prophecy that we are fighting against enemies that challenge his rule as their agents undermine it from within. The prophecy that we are tested and tested, forever until our inevitable demise. But by whom? This is shrouded. I have seen it with my own eyes, written in secret code in data cards, given to me by the power of the Primarch's seal. I have seen the news in the box, the reports in the data slates, the images on the holoiths. I have seen the carnage, the heroism, the desperation. I have seen the revelation, the plan. Abaddon has appeared, the despoiler, the arch-traitor, the warmaster of chaos. He has led his Black Crusade to the heart of the Imperium, to Terra itself, or wills. They spread, they look. Look for what? This is unknown. He has fought against the Dark Angels and the Blood Angels deep within Segmentum Obscurus, two of the most ancient and noble chapters of Space Marines. He has brought death and destruction to countless worlds and billions of lives. Madness and evil spread through the darkness. But he has also met his match. The Lion has returned. The Primarch, the Lord of Caliban, the first among equals. He has awakened from his long slumber. His methods and return defy human comprehension and are a matter of myth and legend. He has rallied his sons and other allies. He has offered redemption to the ones who can be redeemed, from across the galaxy and beyond time. He has confronted Angron, the traitor son, now demon prince, and his horde of traitors, monsters and madmen, and he will do so again in a battle that will decide the fate of the Imperium. In holy terror, this is what I've uncovered. I must witness this. I must record this. I must honor my duty, my oath, my faith. I must follow, observe, document. I must uphold the legacy, the legend, the prophecy. I must serve the Imperium, the Emperor, the God. I must return to Terra, tell my story. I am a Historitor, a storyteller of the Imperium's glorious work, and I must be in the final battle for mankind. I will fulfill my duty. Welcome back, my friends. Today I want to share with you the lore about one of the most important things about the Indomitus Crusade. Its power and glory sailing across the stars, saving thousands of worlds, and fighting back against enemies of the Imperium in massive fleets. But beneath this, also important work is being done. Historitors, agents of the Logos Historica Verita, uncover hidden history, suppressed information, and the remnants of human culture everywhere they go, as the history of mankind must be placed back together piece by piece by piece once again. In ancient Imperial history, when the Emperor led his great crusade to save mankind from all the dangers and threats that were encroaching every human world and reuniting the long-separated world of the Imperium, the Great Crusade marked a brief era in human history of rebuilding, reunification, and rapid technological advancement and rediscovery of mankind's achievements long past, following the complete downgrade of human civilization of mankind into techno-barbarism during the 5,000 solar years of the Age of Strife. And during the Crusade, the Emperor introduced a sort of liberal bureaucrat documentarist corps of the Imperial servants that were charged with collecting and categorizing any and all historical events, sites and participants, and all else that could be there for future generations to learn. They were the Remembrancer Order. The Remembrancers, they were responsible for documenting all the heroic acts performed by the Imperial Army and Space Marine legions during the war, so that the Imperium of man's future generations would know how mankind came to rule the galaxy. The majority of the Remembrancers were Terrans who had competed with other noble artists of the time for the privilege of travelling with the Astaris-led crusading fleets. They were journalists, documentarists, painters, philosophers, and artists of all kinds. But during the heresy, the Remembrancers were most, if not all, eliminated from the now traitor fleets, so they could not record or transmit any and all information back to Terra. And only to add to this, the great betrayal of the tragic event, all the records of work of the Remembrancer Order are now lost, or maybe even hidden away by the Inquisition. And this is now, and it has been for millennia, a crippling self-inflicted blow by the Imperium. Of course, there are reasons to hide information about the heresy, but the history of mankind has been buried along with it, keeping the people of the Imperium submerged in ignorance and fear. This is something the Lord Commander Roboute Guilliman is trying to correct. Not long after the Primarch came back to life and took over as Lord Commander of the Imperium, Guilliman started the Indomitus Crusade to push back the forces of chaos that were spread across the galaxy because of the Great Rift. When the war effort subsided for a while, the Primarch didn't stop working. He worked hard in his scriptorium flagship, the Mercreg's Honor, even though he didn't have to. Guilliman still didn't know everything that had happened in the 10 millennia since he was deadly wounded by Fulgrim at the Battle of Thessala and then put on stasis. He was disappointed, angry, and somewhat depressed to learn that much of mankind's past during the age of the Imperium had become based on superstition, fanaticism, and heresy, just like so much else that used to be based on facts. His father's dream shattered. If anything, humanity's knowledge was worse now than it had been after the Unification Wars, when the Emperor united Terra before the Great Crusade. A lot of Terra's old past, which the Remembrancers of Guilliam's time had worked hard to piece together, had been lost. Through the Administratum's Historical Revision Unit and Edicts of the Obliteration, the truths about the Immaterium's real nature had been kept from people on and off throughout mankind's long and troubled history, via simply the destruction of documents everywhere, the death penalty for holding them or even knowing about them, and the gigantic censorship in the one who were kept. Even though it had become impossible to fully stop the terrible effects of the warp, that didn't stop the Inquisition from trying. The Imperial people were not allowed to know anything about the daemons or their ruinous powers. All, for better or worse, is suppressed. Many harmless people lost their lives because they accidentally found out the truth about such things. And this has been happening for millennia. Even Guilliman, who was the Imperial Regent, ran into trouble with the Inquisition when he tried to learn more about this. To fight against their puritanical attempts to change history, he trained his own group of historians. Between battles, he looked out for curious minds and keen personalities, the kind that had been looked down upon for a long time in the Imperium, and saved them from prison or a brainwipe. The first few he taught himself when he had the time. They, in turn, taught more and even more. Each was looked at by the Primarch himself. Those who did well got the title Historitor Investigatus. Those who didn't meet his high standards were put in jobs that were easier, like librarians, servants, and helpers in the new organisation. From the history books he read, Guilliman knew that the harsh Imperium government was not kind to the defeated. As time went on after his rebirth, the number of Historitors went from 4 to 8 to 16, and then to 500 agents and 1,000 support staff in the Logos Historica Verita. They tried to make an accurate history of the Imperium of Man by using academic skills that had been lost for a long time. Even though the chances were against them, small parts of the Logos tried to find old records. When they showed the Primarch's seal, illegal vaults were opened and emptied, and their contents were copied and sent to Guilliman's Crusade, wherever it was. The work of the Logos was hard and dangerous. In the early years of Era Indomitus, war zones covered half of the galaxy, and Guilliman's historical teams sometimes vanished without a trace. Often, the people in power at the time and the more conservative agents of the Inquisition stood in their way. But Guilliman couldn't be stopped. He was too determined to get the truth back to the people. Putting together a full and accurate history of humanity was a huge and nearly impossible job, made even harder by the fact that even the Imperial dating system was very wrong. As the Primarch read through thousands of standard years of history written on every possible tool used by humans, he learnt about the chronostrife of Terra, a bitter, ongoing war within the Ordo Chronos over the Imperium's way of keeping track of time. From what he read, he felt hopeless. Not even his father's calendar was still in good shape after 1,000 years. During the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, the normal way of dating things gave some idea of how things happened over time. However, like everything else the Emperor made, the calendar had been ruined by both strict adherence to the rules and careless changes. From the Imperial standard, different dating systems grew up, making it nearly impossible to write a true history of the human-populated galaxy. As the first phase of the Indomitus Crusade came to an end, about 12 standard years after Guilliman woke up, he figured that the current year could be anywhere from the early 41st millennium to a whole millennium later, based on the 5 main factions' interpretations of the Imperial calendar. This did not include the many other, more heretical interpretations. Guilliman was hoping to find a way to fix the Imperium's complicated dating system, but he couldn't. It was something else that would need his personal help to fix in the end. Now, for the ending of this video, I will share an excerpt from the book Dawn of Fire, where the Primarch Roboute Guilliman talks with the 4 founding members of the Logos Historica Verita: Devon Mudiah, an Imperial noble; Solana of Mars, a low-ranking tech priest; Fabian Gulfrain, a former member of the Administratum; and Vibolo. Not much is known about him. While Fleet Territus had already left for the Maturta Sound, and Guilliman's own fleet Primus was still preparing, Guilliman had given the Founding 4 their first proper assignment as historians, writing an accurate account of the Horus Heresy. As Fleet Primus is leaving Terra's orbit, they have finished their work, and Fabian Gulfrain is the last to present his part to the Primarch. "Have you finished?" Vibolo nodded. "Just. I have a couple of things I'd like to tidy up a bit. The presentation, not the content." I am ready for him. Fabian looked glumly at the tatty notebooks he'd scrawled his history into. There was a pile of them next to his right hand, most sprouting unruly tongues of paper where he'd stuffed in supplemental notes. His presentation was awful when he used to take such care. Before all this, I thought writing forbidden histories in 20-minute bursts every day was hard. He smiled. I had no idea. Are you nearly done? Fabian nodded. Just a few more pages, that's all. Vibolo gripped his shoulder. I'll see you tomorrow then. Tomorrow, said Fabian. Viablo swayed off. He had a curious, lurching walk. Tomorrow, Fabian repeated softly to himself. Tomorrow. His eyes ran over the lines he had written. He was deep into the analysis of the consequences of the war and realized then that some of what he had committed to paper could possibly be construed as critical of the returning Primarch. Scratch that, he thought. It was critical. He sighed. Guilliman said he wanted the unvarnished truth, so that was what he was getting. Besides, he thought as he set his pen to the paper again, it's much too late to change it now. The pen scratched over the pages, and he did so for several more hours. Fabian was the last of them to see Roboute Guilliman, leaving him fretting throughout the ship's nominal day about what the principal would think of his work. Eventually, they came for him, and he was led through hushed halls where columns braced on the deck with spreading arms like so many iron trees. Fabian was the last of them to see Roboute Guilliman, leaving him fretting throughout the ship's nominal day about what the principal would think of his work. Eventually, they came for him, and he was led through the hushed halls where columns braced the deck with spreading arms like so many iron trees. The light of the electro-flamebore danced on polished metal surfaces. His guide wore the uniform of the Officio Logisticarum, but he was not a man Fabian knew, and he rebuffed Fabian's attempts at conversation. A primaris space marine in ultramarine robes took charge of him. He introduced himself as equerry to the Imperial regent, but though he did say his name, it fell out of Fabian's head as soon as it had been placed there. The space marine led him through the back corridors to the regent's quarters. Guilliman's accommodation on the Dawn of Fire was scarcely less palatial than his buildings on Terra. Even in those narrow places intended for menials, the walls were decorated, and every fitting was of the highest technology. The Primaris Marine walked barefoot, making hardly any noise despite his immense size. The corridors were not designed for space marines, and his shoulders brushed the sides. The few servants they met bowed out of the way. In a little time, the equerry opened a door that he could pass through without stooping, and they entered the Primarch's personal domain. Fabian had been in the Primarch's quarters a few times since they had come up to Fleet Primus, but he had never seen it so tidy. A transformation had come over the scriptorium. Before the departure from Terra, it had been arranged chaotically, with books in heaps left open at important pages. Now they were all stowed away, and although there were books out, they sat neatly on lecterns, no longer disturbing the fine symmetry of the chamber. The walls and ceiling were clad in dark wood. A parquet floor covered the decking. It was all new, but felt ancient, a venerable lent by the thousands of old tons on the shelves. The ship itself was very old, but he didn't feel it anywhere but here, in this librarium. The Space Marine opened a pair of steel doors. Beyond them were less crowded spaces decorated in the restrained style of Ultramar, with layouts dictated by the golden ratio and pale marble stone cladding the walls. There, Guilliman waited for Fabian in a massive chair, reinforced to support his and the armour of Fate's combined weight. He indicated a human-sized piece of furniture. Thankfully, this was on a platform opposite the piano, which allowed humans to stand at the table. Fabian hated the tall chair arrangement he'd experienced elsewhere. It diminished a man to sit like a child. "Fabian," said Guilliman, "it's good to see you. Please take a seat." Fabian was obliged to climb a run of 3 steps to get to the platform, but it was better than the alternative. Guilliman wore an expression of open, honest interest, but Fabian became flustered, fiddling with the stack of books and dossiers of notes he had brought with him. "Have you finished the task I set you? The history I require for the fleet commanders?" "Yes, my lord." Guilliman waited. Fabian said nothing. Guilliman leaned forward a little. "Please begin, Historitor." "Ah, yes, Well, the concise history of the Great Heresy War is finished, you will be glad to hear. He put his books down. It was a large undertaking, but I am of course very grateful to be given this opportunity. He pushed forward the stack of notebooks that contained the manuscript. Here it is, all finished. He winced at his repetition. Finished, finished, finished. Is that all he could say? Guilliman reached over and pulled the pile towards him. Fabian felt immensely intimidated, his bladder squeezed with the unwelcome need to urinate. Guilliman rested his hand on the books, but did not open them. There were a series of popular romances published in the late 33rd millennium that proved to be surprisingly accurate, at least in parts, said Fabian. For flavour, I utilised those quite heavily, but for the style, you understand, to make it readable. History must be accessible, doesn't it? I think so. Fabian, Guilliman said softly. My reasoning being that there are a lot of people who need to read it, great lords and ladies though they are, and far above my level of intelligence and ability, and he was going pink. Well, they are all very busy, and if I make it engaging without bending the truth, you see, so it's all true. Fabian, said Guilliman more firmly. Fabian jumped. He had forgotten the power Guilliman could put into his voice. My lord, sorry. You are babbling. Calm down. I understand this is important to you, and that you are afraid, but nothing terrible is going to happen. We have left Terra. Even if I find this work lacking, you will not be sent back to your old home. I will find you working with the Logos Historica Verita in a lesser capacity instead. Rest assured, you have already been useful. So please, slow down. Breathe, Fabian. Well, he took a deep breath. Yes, breathe. Better, said Guilliman. There was a hint of humour around his eyes. Do you want some water? Maybe some wine? No, thank you. Fabian shook his head and gulped. Better. Guilliman's armour whined softly as he lifted his hand. Then continue. As I was saying, Fabian said, deliberately now, though the Emperor alone knew why he had started with the tone of his work. He had to continue to save some face. The tone I took from the romances, He realised he was gabbling again. He took a breath and slowed down. But the facts came from the primary sources, particularly from the personal notes of a man named Kyril Sinderman. Suddenly convinced that he had the name wrong, though he had read and reread it at least 1,000 times in the last month. He dropped his bundle of notes on the table and searched through them, fumbling in his haste, taking much longer than he should have. He found it eventually. Sinderman, he confirmed. Sinderman, as if saying it again would stop it from changing. Stay calm, said Guilliman, radiating immense calm himself. I am. You are not, said Guilliman. I knew Sinderman. He had an interesting and long life. He was a good man. Yes, quite a lot of his work bears the highest seals of the Inquisition. With good reason, said Guilliman. He wasn't going to elaborate. Guilliman drew the top notebook off the pile and flipped it open. It was a simple thing of low quality, with a card cover and stapled spine. Fabian had the best available to him if he wanted, but he thought that was a waste. He felt more comfortable using scraps, like he had for so long. If the history were approved, it would be transcribed into a better volume to be prepared for printing and eventual dissemination. But for the moment, Guilliman was forced to hold the cardboard cover down with one mighty finger to stop it from springing up. Guilliman frowned as he read the first page. He must have taken it in one draft, but he stared at the opening line for a long time. I was there the day the Emperor slew Horus. He read out the quote Fabian had chosen to open his work slowly, giving Fabian the fear that he had displeased his lord. But the Primarch nodded approvingly. An arresting first line. Good. I thought so, said Fabian with a touch of pride. It's from Cinderman's work. He had quite a way with words. Words were his craft, originally. Guilliman began turning the pages rapidly. Good. Good. This is very good, Fabian. You have not disappointed me. Have I succeeded? Fabian said, fighting to stop his voice from squeaking. You have. Guilliman picked up the second book and read it faster. Fabian thought he might have been able to tear through it so fast that the pages would blur had he not been held back by the clumsiness of his armour. Yes, I am satisfied. I will review all of this, make notes, and then you shall prepare it for dissemination. Fleetmaster's eyes only. They need to know what kind of war we are fighting, but no one else. He moved on to the third book. He paused before opening it and looked Fabian in the eye, something the historian still felt physically painful. You have brought something for me. I have brought something for you. In that box, over there is a gift. Fabian headed over to the other table, indicated by Guilliman. A long wooden case lay on the polished surface. He pointed at it and asked a question to the Primarch. That's the one. Yes, said Guilliman. Open it. Guilliman continued to flick through the stacked pile of notebooks, digesting in moments what had taken Fabian weeks of frantic work to pen. There were two simple clasps holding the box closed. Fabian snapped both open and lifted the lid. A pair of golden chains held the lid in position, stopping it from dropping back to the table. Inside the box, couched in velvet, was a beautiful sword. A power sword, if the finned cooling unit near the hilt was any indication. Long and straight, with designs the length of the fuller. A las pistol nestled below it, snub-nosed and aggressive-looking, despite the fine etching that covered its bronzed surface. There was a belt, a holster, and a sheath in the box, along with the weapons. A cold rush of fear coursed through Fabian. Nobody had said anything about guns. He had not even considered them. Surely, he thought, a historian's main weapon would be a pen. He looked back at the box and understood he had made some catastrophic assumptions about his new life. Guilliman had reached the midway point of Fabian's history. He finished the book he was reading and placed it neatly on the pile of books he had already read. Sergeant Hetidor reports that you have performed excellently in his physical conditioning sessions. Your health has improved remarkably. He recommends that you begin combat training soon, before the others, in fact. Apparently, you have the knack for it. He thinks you may excel. The others, said Fabian. He was so shocked that he missed the implication of his own excellence, something that would ordinarily make him proud. Combat training. Yes, Fabian, I am giving you weapons, said Guilliman slowly, and you need to be able to use them. Pick up a power sword without learning its proper use, and you'll likely cut your own leg off. He laid both armoured hands flat on the table. You really are not yourself today. This is not the most difficult of concepts to comprehend. Again, there was a little flash of humour. Fabian looked back into the box. But, what need have I for a sword and a gun? His face went white. If he was expected to bear weapons, he would be expected to kill, and that meant he would also be expected to die. Guilliman pulled a face that said it all, but he said it anyway. Because I'm going to war, Fabian, and you're coming with me. In case this most obvious of facts had escaped your attention. You know, the customary response when a priest bestows a gift such as that is effusive thanks. Thank you, he managed in a small voice. That will do, said the Primarch. He got up. Come with me. Fabian followed the Primarch. Guilliman pushed open a set of beautifully inlaid wooden doors and took him through into another room that Fabian had never seen before. He gasped at what he saw. A mosaic floor radiated a sunburst pattern out to a semicircular window 50 feet across. There was a single piece of armor glass, so flawed that it appeared invisible, so the floor looked like it finished at the open void. Outside were dozens and dozens of enormous ships. Their plasma engines glowed a soft blue. They were sailing above the plane of the ecliptic, and Sol shone from beneath and behind, lighting up the armada with stark, yellow light. The void was black as brushed fur, and the stars were diamond chips. There was no sound there, only the soft rumble of the dawn of fire as it pushed through the void. Fabian was struck by a deep sense of peacefulness and blissful solitude. Guilliman walked across to the window. The room was empty, and his heavy footsteps echoed. He turned back to Fabian, who remained at the door. "Come now, historian. You need to observe this for your records." Fabian hurried to join him. He pulled a notepad and ink pencil from his belt pouch. "Fleet Primus," said the Primarch. "We sail for Galthamore to take the warp gate there. At Marchota's Sound, we have had our first victory. Fleet Territus has destroyed a large enemy force and prevented an attack on the heart of the Segmentum Solar. But there will be many battles to come, thousands of them, and if we win them all, we may not win the war." Fabian wrote all this down in cramped shorthand. "But I tell you, Fabian, though I am a relic of another age, my brothers are all gone. Though I am opposed and the sky itself is wounded, I will fight to the last breath. I will push the enemy out of Imperium Sanctus. I will do the same to whatever lies beyond the rift, and bring order to the galaxy again. I will do all in my power to see that the Emperor's dream is not forgotten, and that the nightmare that has taken its place is ended. One day, Fabian, perhaps you will write similar words to those of Cinderman. You too may pen, 'I was there,' in pride." The returned and sainted Primarch stared out over the force he had built, past the long convoys of ships, arrowing towards the system's edge. "It is time I lived up to my name and became the Avenging Sun again," he said. "The Indomitus Crusade has begun."